The next topic we have is Auditors Proficiency. This is subunit 2.4 on GLIME Unit 2. So let us read what it says and discuss them in detail. Engagements must be performed with proficiency and due professional care. Okay, what these two terms means: proficiency and due professional care. Proficiency, there are certain areas that internal auditors must be proficient in. We will read about them in a little while later. Proficiency means the skill, the competencies that you must have as an internal auditor. The skills and competencies that you must have in order to discharge your responsibilities as an internal auditor. There is no compromise. You must be proficient in certain areas. I'll tell you what these are just a few slides later. So proficiency means that the skills, the competencies, the knowledge to fulfill internal audit responsibilities. There is no compromise in it. Certain areas that you must be proficient in, and if you don't have the proficiency in that area, definitely you will violate the code as well as the standards. The next is due professional care. Due professional care is a very gray area, not black, not white. How do we define this subjective term? What is due professional care? Due professional care is a very subjective term. You might mean due professional care to be something else. I might mean something else. I mean, we can have different meanings of due professional care. What it could be generally expressed in that due professional care means I'm an auditor, Vakar, you are an auditor, Ms. Samia, let's say you are an auditor. So if we are applying due professional care, it means if we are reasonable and wise and competent internal auditors, then the care and skill you will use, I will use, Ms. Samia will use, maybe Zishan Maqsood will use. If you use the care and skill that is expected from reasonably prudent and competent internal auditor, that is expected from any reasonable, prudent, competent auditor, doesn't matter about his religious affiliations, his social status or whatever. The reasonable, prudent, competent internal auditor, the skill and care that we expect from such individual, that's what you call the due professional care. So due professional care means the care and skill expected of a reasonably prudent and competent internal auditor. That is expected from any prudent and any reasonable internal auditor. That is due professional care. That doesn't mean absolute 100% performance. That is not possible for any auditor. Error-free, infallible performance. That is not possible. We are not gods. Internal auditors are not gods. We can do work in a reasonable manner. So a reasonable, prudent internal auditor, the skill and care he uses, we call it that he is using due professional care. Our work does not mean total perfection. Remember that. There's a misconception that internal auditors know and they can do everything. There's a limit to everything. So we can provide reasonably prudent, reasonable conclusions. We cannot provide absolute assurance. We can provide only the reasonable assurance. Alright, the next area is the shared and ultimate responsibility about proficiency. Okay. You are chief audit executive or internal auditor, it doesn't matter. But you have to be applying proficiency and due professional care. I mean, every person in the internal audit department has the responsibility to use due professional care. What is due professional care? Means the skill and care that any reasonable, any wise internal auditor will do. That is due professional care. It's not something extraordinary. Just what a reasonable internal auditor can do. That's what due professional care. So chief audit executive or any person or internal auditor, manager audit, any individual involved in the internal audit department, he has the responsibility to employ due professional care and proficiency. That's what it says. All right. Okay, so internal audit department, let's say if I'm the head of internal audit department, there are 7 people working under me. Some are expert in finance, some are expert in computer process studies, some are good at operation management. So as a chief audit executive, it is my responsibility to assign each individual for the job that he has the skill for. And the internal audit department must collectively possess certain skills that are needed. For example, let's say I'm working for an oil refinery, working for an oil refinery. All right. So I'm the internal auditor, head of internal audit in that company, in that oil refinery. So I have 7 people working under me. I'm not expert in cracking of hydrocarbons. This is not my domain. I'm head of internal audit. The rest of the guys are CIS. One of them is expert in chemistry. He has done chemical engineering. So why do we need that skill? Because our work involves studying of cracking of hydrocarbons. I'm sure you people know that when the petroleum is entered in the fractional distillation chamber, it is broken down into smaller fractions like gasoline, diesel, kerosene, jet oil, fuel oil, and the bitumen. That's what the black thick liquid. So if I do not have the skill, the rest of 4, 5, 6 people, one of them is employee of internal audit department. He has that skill. He is engineering in chemical. He's a chemical engineer. So it means if I do not have, some other employees in that internal audit department do not have, but one person employed by the internal audit department has that skill. So it means it's okay. Now the spectrum is complete. So not every internal auditor needs to be expert on cracking and expert on chemical engineering, but only one person, if he has the skill, we give the full set of knowledge that is required to conduct the audit. So it means the chief audit executive must ensure that persons assigned to each engagement collectively possess the necessary knowledge. So if 6 out of them are qualified CIAs, one of them is a chemical engineer. So that's a crucial skill that we need to conduct the audit in that oil refinery. So it is the responsibility of chief audit executive that he assigns persons to each engagement that collectively possess that knowledge and necessary for the conduct of that work. Like for example, if we're working for I am head of internal auditor in a computer software development company. I do not have the IT skills, but some person in my department, internal audit department, should have the skill needed to conduct the audit. So not every person should have, but the internal audit department as a whole should have that skill. That is very important to learn. So the internal audit department collectively possesses the necessary skill, knowledge, and other competencies to conduct the engagement appropriately. So that's very important. Not every knowledge you need to have, but the internal audit department should have all the necessary knowledge, skills that are needed to work, that are needed to conduct the engagements appropriately. And we already read that due professional care means that the skill and care exercised by any prudent, any reasonable internal auditor in the given situation. That's due skill, due professional care. And the due professional care means that you're following code of ethics. It's a part of your ethics. Next. So what we have read, it has been same wording. It has been fully explained in attribute standard 1210. We don't need to memorize them. Please remember, we don't need to memorize them. We just need to remember that they do exist. So we do not need to memorize the standard numbers. In fact, these standards are all scattered across your syllabus. So you just need to read the theory well and apply them in the given situation. So the same wording, that is, the internal auditor must possess the knowledge, skills, and other competencies needed to perform their individual responsibility that we have just read. So the internal auditor department should collectively possess and obtain the knowledge and skills and other competencies to perform their responsibilities. That's what just we have read, that the internal audit department as a whole should have that competency, the knowledge and skill. Not every internal auditor knows everything. So the internal audit department as a whole should have that skills. That what it says clearly in the standard 1210. The standard requires only that internal audit activity as a whole, internal audit department as a whole, not each auditor individually, be proficient in all necessary areas. So that makes sense. So basically there are 4 levels of professional competencies that internal auditor must possess. In certain areas, we must be proficient, absolute, proficient, not absolute, the word absolute could be misleading, that we must be proficient in that area. There is no compromise in that. Then there are certain areas of knowledge that where we should have to just know what they are, knowledge. Certain areas for we just need to have understanding, and then for certain areas we just have little appreciation. So in fact these 4 different levels represents the depth of knowledge. Proficiency being the highest level of knowledge, knowledge lesser, understanding further lesser, and appreciation just the little understanding of what it is all about. We'll read about them in detail. What exactly proficiency means, knowledge. So if you rank them, proficiency represents the highest level of understanding of something, deeper knowledge, and appreciation means just familiarity. So certain areas we must be proficient in, and for certain areas we just need a little appreciation. So I will delve in detail and then explain what these terms means. So first of all, the most important one, proficiency. That's the core of our work. Proficiency means internal auditor must be proficient. That's the must area. Component of internal audit's proficiency. Proficiency means the ability to apply knowledge to certain situations that you internal auditor might come across. Like you're conducting an engagement, so you should have that knowledge that you need to apply in the particular circumstances. And that knowledge is so well entrenched in your mind that you don't need any books or any research or any assistance. Means certain areas of knowledge that you must be very good at, and for that you do not need any help or research or assistance, detailed research or assistance. So proficiency means something that you must be very good at, for which you do not need extensive help from anybody, any extensive research or any assistance. So what it means, that ability to apply knowledge to situations likely to be encountered and to deal with them appropriately yourself without extensive help or recourse to technical research and assistance. You must be good at this area. So what are those areas? Clearly the work that we do. The internal audit standards, we must be proficient in them. We must know what they are without research and assistance. Procedures that we perform in the conduct of our engagements, techniques that we perform in the engagement. So we have to be proficient in standards. We should not need any help applying these standards. We should not need any extensive help in applying the procedure. We should not need any help in techniques in performing the engagements. And finally, we must, and then most important, like for example, internal auditor are not required to be professional accountants. You know why? Because not every work relates accounting. So you will be surprised that we need accounting is, these are the 4 levels that we are talking about. Proficiency means something that you must know, and for that you should not need any extensive research or any assistance. Appreciation is the lowest level of knowledge that internal audit should have. Accounting has been put here in appreciation. Accounting, economics, commercial law, taxation, they are in appreciation. Remember, internal auditors are not expected to be proficient in accounting. We are expected to be proficient in standards, in procedures, in techniques in performing engagements. So it means that a person who is not a commerce graduate can become a good internal auditor, because accounting is not as such required under the standards. So we do not, but if your work extensively involves financial audit, then you must be proficient in accounting as well. That's what it says. And must have proficiency in accounting principles and techniques if your work extensively related to the financial records and reports. So that makes sense. So what it means, that we should be proficient in auditing standards, in procedures and techniques, not in accounting, because accounting is tested at appreciation level. But if your work involves financial records and reporting, then you should have proficiency in accounting principles as well as techniques. So it makes sense. We are not expected to be accountants, but if our work involves accounting, like for example, in a team of 10 internal auditors, at least 1 or 2 must have knowledge of accounting. So group as a whole should be having sufficient knowledge and proficiency to conduct the engagements appropriately. The next level is knowledge. Of course, little lower in efficacy than proficiency. Proficiency in standards, in procedures and techniques, and also in accounting if your work involves financial records and accounting or the financial audit. The next level is knowledge. So if you just lay them down, let me just write them down. If you could just be put in a hierarchy. So if that hierarchy is represented something like this, then means the topmost is proficiency. We must be proficient in this. Lower level represents knowledge, further lower level represents understanding, and the least important, still important, is appreciation. Accounting, tax, economics, commercial law all fall in this category. And the topmost level, what we have is standards, must be very clear on them, procedures and techniques. Alright, so next we have the areas that are covered in the knowledge level. What does knowledge mean specifically under the standards? Internal auditors must have the knowledge of indicators of fraud. That there are certain indicators that represent the fraud might be possible. So the internal auditors must have the knowledge of indicators. That what are the indicators that represent fraud? So indicators of fraud and sufficiently to identify them. So must remember, internal auditors should have the knowledge of indicators where there is a red flag, the possibility that not a surety that fraud would exist, I mean there is a possibility of fraud. And then internal auditors, since we are not expected to be IT specialists, we are not IT specialists, but we should have knowledge of information technology risks, that what are the risks related to computer technology that we use in the company. And we are not expected to be proficient in using computers in auditing. There is a use of computers in auditing which you call CAAT, C-A-A-T, computer assisted audit techniques. We are not expected to be proficient. I know many auditors I would work with, qualified since 25 years ago. They do not even know how to use computer properly, but they are very proficient auditors. So being a good auditor doesn't mean you have to be proficient in computers. But since we are using computer assisted audit techniques, so the auditor should have knowledge of the available technology based audit techniques. HCL is a software that we use for audit techniques, ACL, sorry. Then there are many data extraction techniques we use in the computer based audit techniques. There are many off-the-shelf available software that we can use to extract the client's data, and we can sort the data from the point of view of audit significance. So we must have knowledge of indicators of frauds. We must have knowledge of information technology risk, and as internal auditor we should have knowledge. We are not expected to be proficient, but should have knowledge of the computer assisted audit techniques, available technology that we use in auditing. So we just should have knowledge. Next level, the lower one, is understanding. Okay, we should be proficient in standards, procedures and techniques, and if our work involves accounting, we should be proficient in accounting. Then we read about the knowledge level. Knowledge means should be aware of the possibility indicators of fraud, and we should have knowledge of information technology risk, and we should have knowledge of how information technology based techniques can be used in audit. Next level is understanding. Okay, now what does the word mean? Proficiency, knowledge and understanding. Understanding means that internal auditor, of course, is a knowledgeable person. Internal auditor, chief audit executive of the internal audit department as a whole. We have knowledge that we apply to the given situation that we might encounter during our work. Like for example, as an internal auditor, I am working in a textile industry and I know that the wastage level is a standard of 5%. That's the normal wastage. If for a particular period the wastage has been 25% of the material entered, now this represents a significant deviation, and I must apply my knowledge in what happened, what has resulted in this. I must be able to investigate it, to research and find out what happened, why did we lose 25% of the input material. So it means, understanding means you should have the knowledge that you can apply in a given situation, and then you can use research. Remember, in proficiency, we should not, or we may not need extensive recourse to research and assistance. Proficiency means you should know them. But an understanding level, that you find some problem, you can apply that knowledge, and for that you can research, you can obtain help, you can obtain further guidance. So an understanding level means you're not proficient. If you find deviation from the standard, like 5% wastage is the normal, but the company witnessed 25% wastage in the current period, what happened? As an internal auditor should have the ability to research, to find the reasonable solution. What happened? What was the reason that it happened? So this is the first area in understanding, that we should be able to apply broad knowledge to situations likely to be encountered, and we should be able to conduct research and to find a reasonable solution. We can resort to help. Then in what areas we should have understanding? The next area I say is that the internal auditor should have understanding of the principles of running a business, how the business is run. This is included in your part 3. Your part 3 is amazing. Part 3 includes almost everything. Business management is a major part of your part 3. So the internal auditor must have the understanding of management principles. And being a good judgment and opinion holder, internal auditor should be able to identify why the business is not doing the way it should. Other businesses are doing well, why our business are doing badly? Other businesses are facing 5% normal losses, but we have seen a 25% normal wastage, which is of course clearly abnormal. So I mean, internal auditor should have understanding of certain areas, knowledge that he can apply, and then he can resort to research, help from other resources. So internal auditor, and again at the same time, internal auditor should have the knowledge of management principles, which he can use to assess why the business is doing good or why the business is not doing good compared to the good business practices. So understanding doesn't mean that you should be proficient, but you should have at least awareness level and some little understanding that what are the good business practices and what is happening in the company I'm working for. So not needed, proficiency is not needed in that list level. The last is the appreciation. This is the lowest level. Appreciation means simply ability to recognize. So we have 4 levels. Let us just review a bit of them. Proficiency means you have to be expert in that. Standards, techniques and procedures. And accounting if your work involves financial audit. Next we read the knowledge. Knowledge of IT, information risks, and the use of computer assisted audit techniques. Then we have understanding. Understanding means knowledge that you can apply in the given situation, then you can take help. The external research you can apply, like knowledge of management principle, knowledge of industry conditions and how the business is doing, the good judgment as a business executive. And the last level is the appreciation. It is simply ability to recognize. Just ability to know what it is only. You don't need absolute knowledge or the detailed knowledge for this. So what are the areas that you need to just have the appreciation of? Means areas where you can conduct additional research, where you can go for further deeper knowledge. You can take assistance in this domain. So those areas represents accounting, economics, commercial law, taxation. See, I am not expected to be proficient in accounting unless my work involves financial audit. I'm not expected to be an economist. I am not expected to be a lawyer. I'm not expected to be a tax expert. I'm not expected to be a finance expert or mathematics expert, which you call the quantitative methods. Fraud expert. I'm not fraud expert. Remember, fraud investigation is not my mandate unless it has been enshrined in the internal audit charter by the board of directors. I'm not expected to be in the risk management information technology. These are the areas where I should have appreciation of, the ability to recognize what they are. And then we can drill down further and know for ourselves the likely implication of the situation we find ourselves in. So there are 4 levels that we have studied: proficiency, knowledge, understanding and appreciation. Proficiency being the most robust, where you should be good at, and appreciation means just ability to recognize. So there are very helpful mnemonics for you people to remember, like proficiency. What does it mean? We know there are 4 levels: proficiency, knowledge, understanding, and appreciation. To remember what is proficiency, you need to remember the sentence, Paul is a student. Proficiency means Paul is a student. It will be very easy for you to remember that Paul is a student means proficiency in internal audit standards. If you know Paul is a student refers to proficiency, it means we must be proficient in standards. You can further add on procedures and techniques. So Paul is a student represents proficiency. If you learn this sentence, it will be helpful for you to recall what proficiency includes. So Paul is a student refers to proficiency means we should be expert or proficient in standards. We should not have any need to go for any research. Next is knowledge. Knowledge, if you just memorize this sentence, Katie fixes information technology. Immediately you will know that knowledge means Katie fixes information technology, that knowledge of fraud information technology. So it means internal audit should be proficient in standards, internal audit should be proficient in information technology and fraud, and this could be learned by this sentence, Katie fixes information technology. Then there is a third one which we have read, that's called understanding. For understanding, just remember this sentence, under my pillow, this phrase. Under my pillow means the internal audit should have understanding of the management principles. Easier way to remember. And the last one is a longer sentence, that we should have only proficiency of. Proficiency means internal audit should have an accounting. So this sentence will help you. The sentence is an accounting education lets Tim feel intelligent. If you learn this sentence, it means A stands for appreciation, next A stands for accounting, E stands for economics, L stands for commercial law, T for taxation, F for fraud, and I for information technology. So now you might be confused that the fraud and information technology are coming under 2 domains. Previously they were there in understanding, and they are here as well at the appreciation level. So it means they're on the both, there is no overlapping possible. So an accounting education lets Tim feel intelligent means internal auditors should have appreciation of accounting, economics, commercial law, taxation, fraud, and information technology. It means certain areas that are related to information technology, related to computer based audits. That's the area that we should have knowledge of, the fraud. But when you talk about these 2 things under the appreciation, then in this case the information technology and fraud might mean information technology at an enterprise level like ERP, Oracle, Financials, SAP. We are not expert in that. And fraud means some complicated fraud, that synergistic frauds for which the internal audit department doesn't have the skill to. So it means that this fraud and information technology must be at the higher level in the organization, that the fraud and information technology related to the audit was at the knowledge level. So it makes sense. Let's move on what we have next. The last slide, then this unit would be over. Components of auditor proficiency. So practice advisory specifically lists certain skills that are expected from internal auditors. What are those skills? Very important. You must need to understand them very well and clearly. Since internal audit, I'm internal auditor. I have been internal auditor, head of internal audit in a company. So I had to deal with people. Since my work involves dealing with the various clients and auditees, I should have the skill of dealing with people. So I should have good skills, interpersonal skills. I cannot appear to be a prominent and dominant, proud individual, arrogant, moving around because I'm an auditor. Should have skills dealing with people, how to get work done. So as internal auditor should have skills in dealing with people. You should have understanding of human relations, that you cannot get every work by threatened, by coercion. Good friendly manner. So it means you should have skill dealing with the people. You should have understanding of human relations, because we will be working with people, not with machines. And since you don't want to offend your engagement client, you don't want to feel that you are there to investigate or find faults. So you have to keep a good relationship with your client so that you can, in the future, you can conduct engagements also. So you need to maintain satisfactory engagement clients relationship. That's very important. And once your work is done, you submit some reports, formal or informal, oral or written. So you should be good at your communication skills. When I was interviewed in KPMG way back in 2006, so I was interviewed by Agora in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia. So what he was looking for was my written and oral skills in communicating, how well I was able to communicate. So as an auditor, you should have good written and communication skills, good oral skills, because you may have to present something to the management. So your presentation skills should be good. Your written skills, because your ultimate reports that submit to the audit committee, the chief executive officer, the written form. So your skills in English must be good. So your written and oral skills must be good as an internal auditor. So that's a highly valued skill. So I suggest that people should look forward to it. Good speaking, good writing skills. And since the internal auditor has to be clear-headed, very objective and clear-headed, and you should be able to clearly and effectively convey what was the result, what did we achieve, what was the conclusion, you just don't go around keep throwing things that people do not understand. You do not use jargons in your reports. You do not use technical terms that people, the clients cannot understand. So means internal auditors, we will also study communication skills in your chapter, in your part 3. Part 3 is very detailed and extensive. So many things you will learn in your part 3. Part 3 is one of the best papers in CIA. So we will clearly understand that how can internal auditor be effective in conveying his ideas, his opinions, his conclusions. So internal auditors are expected to have clear and concise way to convey matters such as the engagement objective, why the engagement was conducted, what was the evaluations achieved, what are the conclusions, and finally what are the recommendations. Since all of them have to be either presented orally in a meeting or have to be brought down in writing, so you must be good at these 4 domains: identifying, evaluating, concluding, and then finally recommending. So these are explicitly mentioned in your practice advisory that internal auditors should have these skills: ability to deal with people, understanding human relations, keeping and maintaining a good relationship with your clients for whom you work, your auditing clients, and then you should have good oral and written communication skills. That is very valuable. You must pay special attention to this area, and then you will be able to effectively and clearly convey the engagement objectives, what they are, what are your evaluations, what are your conclusions, finally what are your recommendations. So that ends your unit 2.4.